Good day and welcome to Home Office Talks. Thanks for joining. Today we discuss a very special topic, social business. This is something I'm personally very excited about as it illustrates how the concept of people, planet and profit can work. How a business can thrive not only as a profitable business, but with clear benefits also for the environment and the society around. So social entrepreneurship may be even more crucial in these times of the pandemic, where we see so much disruptions in the way we work, just like these home office talks. Today, we have the honor of having very interesting guest with us, very inspiring guest with us. We have Saskia Bruysten, and I hope I pronounce her last name right, the co-founder and CEO of Yunus social business, as well as Dr. Vaibhav Tidke, founder and CEO of S4S Technologies, S4S standing for Science for Sustainability. Welcome very much to the Home Office Talks. We are streaming live from Mumbai and I believe from Berlin and of course here in Cologne. So please use the opportunity to engage with us by writing comments and questions during the broadcast. We'll pick up these questions towards the end of the session. So before getting to our guests, a couple of examples on how social impact business, or as we call it at Covestro, inclusive business can look like. As a global company, we of course serve the needs of everyone on the planet. But of course, the needs vary a lot from different parts of the globe. And of course, that's why the approach requires different aspects from different parts of the world. So in our guiding principle for people, planet and profit, we aim to meet the needs of people in underserved markets through business solutions that create social and environmental impacts. Some examples, let me just mention a few, are agricultural solutions like solar dryers, we'll be hearing soon more about. We have been also involved in cold storage solutions, both of which depend on high-performance materials like polycarbonates and polyurethanes, something you know from Covestro. Additionally, we have been involved in affordable housing projects in Southeast Asia as public-private partnerships. So we are honored to work with Yunus Social Business and S4S Technologies, both pioneers in their fields. Let's see if we can blend them in to our virtual studio here in Cologne. And there they are. Welcome, Saskia and Vaibhav. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having us.
Hi, good to see you.
And I have to say again, I just love your red color. That is so much power coming out of your virtual environment. That's crazy. So let's start with you, Saskia. Before really diving deep into the topic more, could you explain our audience what social impact business means and how do you drive social business with Yunus social business? Why is social impact business so important?
Absolutely, Nico. And just to say thanks about the red. I mean, red is the power and the color of love. And obviously, that's what social businesses in some ways also stand for. So yeah, thanks for having us. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Yunus Social Business. And we believe in the power of social business to end poverty. That's really our mission and our purpose at Yunus Social Business. And we do that in two ways, really. On the one hand, we invest in social businesses that, like, for example, S4S is one of our amazing investees, and we provide them the financing they need to grow their businesses, and we also provide them support. And we do that mostly in developing countries where we have our local teams. So, for example, in India and East Africa and Latin America and various regions. And then on the other hand, we work with large corporations such as Covestro, where we actually help them use their core business to see how they can actually solve major problems in the world. And we do that through social business approaches. So what is a social business? Let me get back to that question that you put out there. A social business is a company that is 100% focused on solving a social problem, but it's doing it in a financially self-sustainable way. And it really focuses on growing more of that impact rather than only making money for the shareholders, which is what traditional businesses do. So that's what we call a social business. And we believe in this incredible power of social business. And that's why we think it's so important, because it uses the very strong power of business, but it uses it not only to make money, but it uses it to actually solve problems. And that's sort of the best of both worlds. So it takes the logic of what governments or NGOs want to do in terms of the goals, but it uses the efficiency and the means of business. And that's why we think it's really such a powerful tool to change the world and make the world a better place.
Thanks, Saskia. And Vaibhav, you certainly have been solving problems. Could you share, Vaibhav, what S4S is doing and how do you serve the people's needs?
Surely, thanks for hosting. So, good afternoon from Mumbai. And at S4S, I'm a co-founder and CEO. And S4S has two main pillars. We look at how science can be used to solve the large societal issues in a more sustainable way. And when we are talking about sustainability, we are talking about how we can have sustainability in terms of financial growth, also in terms of the environmental growth, and also making an impact to the society. So these are the various ways. And we started at the wider vision around how science can benefit to the society, but then we brought it down to a specific angle of mainly working around the agriculture and food value chain. And we started our journey in India, and now we have machines deployed across 14 countries. What we do as a company, we look at agriculture value chains, and we look at where are the inefficiencies in those value chains, overcome those efficiencies with the help of food processing, so that we can save losses, we can increase value of food products, and sell these products to our consumers across the globe at a good margin, so that we as a business are self-sustainable. Covesto and YSB have been a great partner in this journey. YSB came as someone who has seen businesses grow, bringing in capital, bringing in connect, and Covestro is someone who has put a faith on us as a company to take our technology from terrace of the university to the real world a few years back. So I think incredible partners we have today, and really happy to share this session with both our partners.
Thanks, Vaibhav. And I believe we have some B-roll where we can actually show how these solar convector dryers look like. Actually in Nashik and in Maharashtra, where you are also right now. So we may be able to see them up screen as we talk about the topic. Saskia, turning to the role of collaboration, and we heard from Vaibhav that it's the farmers in India who really benefit from the solar dryer solution, and it is driven forward through collaboration and partnership with others. And it clearly takes catalysts such as Yunus Social Business and S4S, and of course companies like Covestro, because without their input it would be difficult to create business opportunities like this one. So Saskia, how do you establish these sort of relationships with companies in the private sector? Who else has to be involved to create this social impact?
Yeah, no, Nico, I think that's a great question. And of course, partnership is absolutely key. There's no doubt. As I mentioned, first of all, obviously, we have in various countries our local teams. So we're not a team based out of Europe. We're a team that actually mostly lives and breathes in the countries that we actually also want to focus on in terms of our impact. So we have local teams in India, in East Africa, and Latin America, as I mentioned earlier. And what they do is focus on scouting great entrepreneurs like Vaibhav, finding them, really looking at their business models, understanding how the business model works, and really understanding how that business model creates social impact, and then also how they can support it, etc. So that's basically what our local teams do. And that's how we establish the relationships to the portfolio companies that we actually eventually end up investing into. That's how we do that, through local scouts, local teams, really. And the relationship to the big companies, which is sort of the other side of our business, that we actually establish through, of course, us also at the global level, speaking at conferences like the World Economic Forum, speaking at conferences like the BDE, like the German Industry Association, connecting through big companies via LinkedIn, etc. There are a variety of different ways to connect to big companies. And what we've seen, and this is very encouraging for me, is that whereas when I started over a decade ago, companies were still a little bit less interested in topics like social impact and environmental impact, and it was really all about, let's say, shareholder value maximization, I really have seen and observed a change over the last decade, that companies are now also reaching out directly to us. So it's not always us running to companies, but companies are running to us because they realize that from those wonderful social businesses like Vaibhav's S4S and others, they can actually learn how to apply these social business principles to their own core business. And why do they need that these days? They need it because employees are not interested in working for big old corporations that don't care about doing anything for the world. Their customers are complaining and say, like, what are you actually doing in terms of your CO2 footprint? Like, what does your value chain look like? Do you have, are you violating human rights? You see now that also grassroots movements such as, for example, Black Lives Matter or also the Fridays for Future are really driving companies to change. And of course, also regulation is changing to actually include social and environmental topics. And so companies are basically forced to do things. And that's why they also are slowly but surely understanding that there's work to do, that they need to improve, but there's also a lot of opportunity in doing something good for the planet and for the people. That sounds very general, but it's good for them in terms of their business model as well. So we don't need to go into details there, but that's for sure. It's also a good business case to do positive things for the world.
Yes, Saskia, and I think that growing social consciousness, it's very encouraging, I think, to see. And of course, we have been seeing the comments of Mohammed Yunus in this respect, which I think is very encouraging for the people who do want to make the world a better place, what many companies definitely want to do. Vaibhav, what's your take on the role of companies like Covestro and their role in creating so-called reversed innovation? Saskia just talked about how actually driving social business can drive innovation in a surprising way sometimes, like this reversed innovation concept where applications that are ultimately developed for underserved communities, but then can reach a much larger market. What's your take on that, Vaibhav?
Surely. So I have a slightly different view on what Saskia is saying, and definitely she's looking from more around enabler or catalytic towards social businesses, and I represent the other side, which is a social enterprise. And how we look at S4S, we really fundamentally think that large corporates have seen how to build companies, how to grow companies. They know how to acquire customers. They know how to acquire supply chain, build supply chain and efficiently. So this is something that exists with them. Now, there is an experience that is lying with these large corporates, and how as a startup company or a social business, we can look at bringing those efficiencies, what large corporates have done over a period of years, and bring those expertise with us. So to give a specific example of S4S, as I said, we started from University Terrace as a solar food processing company or a startup. And what we realized is that our model was basically being developed within a university without any customers, right? And it's a few back story. And with Covesto, and then we created a proposal where Covesto said that, can we have a real use case? We will fund this case, but you have to show that is the machine that you are making does it really add value to the customer? And that's how we moved out first time from university to the real world. So that's a clear value that I have seen a company giving. On the other hand side, we looked at how Covesto's materials can be used to make the solar powered dehydrators. Those are being built by our company. We created a scientific data which showed that with Covesto's material, we can be between 20 to 30% more efficient as compared to the non-Covesto materials. And that's how we started integrating Covesto materials with the scientific principle with us. And as a business, we are growing and we are making and selling this more and more solar dryers, there is more and more Covesto material that is being used. And it's a win-win situation. Covesto is bringing partnership, material expertise, and various connections. And wherever needed, we know that they are accessible to us to provide, to guide and mentor. And at the same time, as a company, we are helping them to scale their businesses. So I think that's a win-win situation. We have seen one case. And after Covesto's learning, we are working with a number of other companies now to see how this partnership can be taken forward. Covesto was one example of material, but we are working with food companies, simplifying their supply chain issues, bringing them close to farmers, and hence helping them to improve their efficiencies in the supply chain. So I think Covesto has given us a very good case study around how large corporates and social enterprises can work, and it has to be a win-win situation. So I think with this example, I will just take a pause and in the mean period, if I get a chance, I will highlight a few other examples in other companies. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Vaibhav. And yeah, you want to add, Saskia?
And maybe Nico, yeah, if I can just come in, because I think your question was also going a little bit along the lines of how can big companies and social businesses actually work together. And I think, Vaibhav, you've mentioned like a beautiful example here. But let me also just from my overview just share a couple of other ways how big companies can sort of apply those social business principles. So one, what we've actually seen a number of companies now doing is actually create social business ventures themselves. So a company using their core competences and building a new spin-off, a new company or a new business unit that actually runs according to social business principles. Let me make one example here. Like one of our very first examples about over a decade ago was a joint venture that we created together with Danone, the yogurt company, to produce Danone yogurt, but that is enriched with vitamins and micronutrients to actually solve the problem of malnutrition. So they didn't start with a product, this is the product and we'll sell it, but they actually started with a problem. This problem is malnutrition. What is the best yogurt we can produce to solve that problem? So that's kind of one. So Danone created this very separate social venture. Actually, many other companies have done this now as well. So for example, Essilor has done this with the iMitra initiative, selling eyeglasses, affordable eyeglasses to the poor, and many other companies have done similar things. Veolia has done something in the water field, AXA has done something in the assurance field, etc. And this is a way where companies really create this new venture, which is sort of like almost the future of this business, but in a smaller business that sort of leads the way and eventually will pull the whole tanker of that business into the right direction. So that's one way of working with social business principles. Another way that we've actually seen that is very useful is when big corporations say they want to buy from social businesses and thereby improve their value chain. So obviously nowadays big corporations have targets of how much CO2 they want to emit or what kind of social impact they want to have in their supply chain. So let me give you one example here. So IKEA, for example, sources from another portfolio company of ours called Rangsutra. Rangsutra employs 2,500 women, basically with a difficult economic background in India, and they sell cushions to them. So, and this is obviously a win-win. IKEA gets its great cushions, and at the same time, they've created a positive impact in their value chain through just buying the products that they anyway would have had to have bought. So we see actually, and similarly, SAP has made a similar commitment that they want to, until 2025, have 5% of all of their procurement come from social businesses and diverse businesses. So this is a second way. And then I guess there's a third way that big companies are collaborating with social businesses. And that's a little bit the way, Vaibhav, how you've seen that they work together to actually create innovation together. Because of course, social businesses have a very different perspectives than large corporations. And often employees in large corporations, have been working in silos and like in big structures for a long time. And actually for them to actually be close to smaller companies that are still closer to driving innovation, that are thinking more entrepreneurial, is extremely good to be able to bring that innovation back into the company. And so what we've seen a lot is that that companies run accelerator programs, or that they've actually create investment funds for social businesses, etc. So those are kind of the three different ways of creating their own social ventures, integrating social businesses into the value chain, or also collaborating with social businesses in a variety of different ways, be it through accelerator programs, impact funds, etc. And I think there's really a lot that can be learned from both sides, and it's a real win-win.
Yeah, and I think these are great examples, Saskia. And I think really looking at solving problems at the ground level is really crucial and important. Vaibhav, I can remember looking at the transport route from farmers in Nashik, and then looking at how does that produce get unspoiled to the supermarkets, and that's a lot of supply logistics challenges that need to be solved, and also lots of expertise that goes beyond the material expertise, in which I think also, Saskia, to your point that yes, there are actually many functions in a big global corporation where you can contribute and help. to make the system work better. So it's not really reduced to the ones who maybe are just looking at very small part, but it's really the holistic system that and everybody can contribute and chip in. And this is, again, I think, a very encouraging signal that companies more and more want to buy from companies that have a social impact and reduce their emissions. There have been a lot of talk, and this is, I think, Saskia, that you'll be also discussing in Davos. There's a lot of talk about how the new normal will look like once humanity learns to live with this pandemic, hopefully with a vaccine and other things. And as I mentioned, Yunus himself talks a lot about the opportunity of not going back, but to a better system, putting social businesses in the center of the recovery. So a beginning of a more inclusive recovery, one might say. So Saskia, how do you think the concept of a social enterprise could be more integrated with every business? You already touched upon that in your earlier comments, but if you think about larger, movements going ahead, and also when you mentioned Davos, collaboration, what could be done?
Totally, and thank you again, Nico, for that. So, a couple of things. So what Yunus is talking about these days is he's saying the world was going towards a disaster. It was like a train driving off a cliff already before COVID hit. In the sense that we have created a capitalism, or let's say a capitalist machine, that actually misrepresents the meaning of what business is actually originally is all about. Sorry, I'm losing my words here a little bit, but in some ways the machine that we've created with capitalism is sort of being bastardized. Business was originally there to solve problems. That's what the original meaning of business was all about. And what we've done and changed through the sort of the 1970s doctrines coming from the US is that business suddenly only had one topic that it was focusing on, which was profit maximization. And that came from the Chicago School from the US, and that was quite widely adopted in the US, and it has been copied all around the world. And that's just not the business that we need anymore in the future. And I think, that Milton Friedman doctrine of the business of business is business, or the idea of, let's say, it is my social responsibility as an entrepreneur to actually make money for my shareholders. That's my social responsibility. That's just not true anymore. And I think we've seen over the last many decades that actually leads to a complete disaster. And that's the disaster that we've been in already before COVID, and that COVID has in some ways created a magnifying glass that shows these issues even more. So what we're therefore saying is there is really no going back. We cannot go back to that old system of this only solely profit-driven capitalism. We need to actually move to a new world. And in that new world, to be very honest, I would say, yes, why should not every business eventually be pretty close to a social business? Why should not every business be there to solve problems and to contribute to society? Let's be honest, we're very clear, and I know this is also the Covestro HomeOfficeTalks, and Covesto is, of course, a big corporation. But if we look at the image of corporations, let's say over the last many years, corporations are perceived clearly as negative contributors to the world, even though, of course, they've also created jobs and done positive things. But I think the general person, if you ask the general person on the street, they do not trust corporations anymore. And why is that? Because indeed, actually, some things have gone wrong, and companies have not always taken up their responsibility. And I fundamentally believe that now we're coming into an age where it is about responsibility, where it is around really living up to the purpose that companies claim that they have. And I think some of these examples, like what Covesto has been doing with S4S, is just one example of what that future could potentially look like. So I think I think that's basically what we're moving towards, to say, actually, there should not be any company out there that is not solving a social or environmental problem. There should not be a company that is just solely there for shareholder value maximization. And I think this is also a little bit what the conversation is at the World Economic Forum and in Davos. So Klaus Schwab, the founder of the World Economic Forum, is talking about a great reset. How can we reset the economy? And he's arguing that right now we have a rare and narrow window of opportunity to do this, because we're reflecting because of COVID, because this is suddenly a pandemic that has hit all of us. And so, yeah, these are the discussions that are happening in Davos. I will share one more thing in that, a little plug here in this context. So we're collaborating with the World Economic Forum now already for some period of time. We've done some research around a topic that we call corporate social entrepreneurship. So when companies create social businesses within, or they collaborate with social businesses like I just described. And we've already interviewed over 50 companies over the last year in terms of what their experiences have been. And based on all of that knowledge, we're actually launching a new program at the World Economic Forum in May, which is happening in May this year. It's been postponed because of COVID. And we'll be inviting somewhere between 10 and 15 corporate social entrepreneurs, so people within big companies that are trying to create that change from within and actually shape the way that overall company looks at the way it's doing business. And we'll be supporting them over a year together with basically an executive circle of CEOs of those big companies to really see how can we make those big corporations look a bit more like social businesses. I'll keep it at that. I hope that sort of shows a little bit the vision that we have for the future, where really pretty much any business should be a social business.
Thanks, Saskia. And actually, we asked our audience on LinkedIn about your topic. You can probably look it up on these channels. On LinkedIn, we asked, how can social impact be integrated into existing business models? And the three options were social entrepreneurship, you just mentioned, then transform into philanthropy, which I think, coming to the point, does a business have to make profit to survive? And then the third point was reduce daily working hours. And by the LinkedIn survey, we had 66% saying that the social entrepreneurship is the way to go, which I think is very encouraging based on what you just said. Employees can make a difference, and they want to make a difference. Otherwise there is no future. And the other thing, which I think does show, we ask on Twitter, how is social impact reflected in daily business, in your opinion? So even 52% said it is greatly. So maybe this is not a good representation on what we ask on Covesto Twitter, but still I think it shows that there's growing conscience. And they used to say there's no business like show business. Maybe there's no business like social business going forward. Who knows? Vaibhav, I want to go back to you because you have been a social entrepreneur for most of your business career. How do you think solutions that you have been driving forward can be scaled up? Because you also mentioned this, businesses and your business has the opportunity to scale up these solutions. So what do you believe are the right ways to scale up these solutions? You mentioned that a little bit forward back then, but if you think about a couple of years ahead, what's the right way to reach the masses?
Sure. So thank you for the question. So looking at the current way where we are standing pre-COVID and post-COVID, one way is clearly looking at the current markets and how do you really scale in those markets. And those questions go back to the fundamental questions around how venture capital market looks at startup companies and social businesses. That basically look at be present in a large size market, number one, be defensible in those markets, and be financially sustainable in those markets. So I think these are the three key principles on which we are building the company, where we are really looking at large agriculture supply chains, which have the potential to transform with the help of technology. And once you bring transformation to these value chains, you bring efficiency, profitability, and defensibility. That's one. Second key aspect of a scale is how do you make the productization of your solution. Let it be building your machine or building your supply chain or reaching out to your customers. How do you ensure that each and every step of your business is scalable and efficient? That's the other point. Third, which is relevant to what we're talking today, is basically role of corporates. And for businesses like us, we are looking at how we can work with large corporates which have a sustained demand and how we can integrate our solutions with them. That can be from agriculture side, food side, or the material side. That's the third angle. So in summary, looking at large markets, working with large corporates where the demand is established. And third is scaling businesses parts and pieces wise, so that when you are scaling and reaching out to millions of farmers, you know that each part of your business is reproducible. You can replicate that. across geographies and across time. So I think these are the key things in which we are looking at scaling of the business from market for partnerships and from business fundamental principles. So yeah, any follow-up question? Happy to answer.
Thanks, Vaibhav, and of course, our great audience. You have the opportunity to ask questions to both of these experts. So actually, I want to start with a question that I got via email because we were not able to get that on social media. Just give me a second. I will look it up here. Here's a question to Vaibhav, was about food preservation and the knowledge of the farmers regarding that. So what's Vaibhav, your take on if you take the farming activities in Maharashtra, for example, how much knowledge is there? How much education needs to be done for the whole value chain from produce to the market to happen? Do you see it's a lack of education, or is it more of a lack of technologies being implemented? There was a question in that direction.
Okay, so I will split the question into two parts. The first question, the first part is lack of education versus technology. For us at S4S, we look at digital technology is an enabler to provide knowledge, and it makes the knowledge diffusion easy across communities. So definitely technology has a role to play, but education is important. The other part of the answer is the value chain itself. Agriculture cycle, at least in India, is annually with the monsoon season. So it goes through its own seasons, and any knowledge that you have created this year, its distribution across farmer communities needs a year because they have to see the success, and so that if they have to replicate, they have to replicate next year. So that's annual cycles. So one is the natural way how the agriculture ecosystem works by nature, and number two is how quickly you can diffuse knowledge, and technology can be definitely enabler. But yes, education is important, and how do you spread that education with the help of tech is an integral part of the conversation.
Thanks, Vaibhav. I have another question I got through email, and that was to Saskia. If I want to become a social entrepreneur, what's your tip on the way to convince others in my company to do that? So, Saskia, what would be some of your tips, as you have been receiving probably this question a lot?
Thank you, Nico. So you said social entrepreneur, right?
Yeah. How can I become a social entrepreneur in my own company? What would be your tips?
Totally. So I think there's a variety of different things that we've learned, and that, by the way, anyone that is interested, this research is also public. So please feel free to look at our website, Yunus Social Business, and then it's called Business as Unusual. So Business as Unusual on the Yunus SB website, and then you'll see all the case studies of our research of how other companies have done it, and also kind of a how-to guide for social entrepreneurs. But let me share a couple of the key highlights. So number one is, whatever you do, make sure that it is closely aligned with the strategy of the company, and that it is actually focusing on the strategic priorities of the company. Because if you don't do that, whatever you will do, it will be sort of something on the side, and the next CEO that comes in, or your next boss that comes in, will just basically kill it. So first of all, make sure that it really is aligned with those strategic elements of the company. The second thing is, of course, you will need to get buy-in of your boss, etc., that you will be able to actually put some resources into this, your own time, and of course, potentially some small budget. So you will need to get that buy-in, because otherwise, of course, it's very difficult to actually move things within a company. Then what we've learned is what is important is actually not just buy-in from your immediate boss, but is actually getting buy-in from the board. And if you have buy-in from the board, things work within corporations. That's how the system of corporations has been created over many decades. You need to actually have buy-in from the top. Once you have buy-in from the top, you can actually move. So you will need to basically be able to make your case, link to your strategy, get the buy-in from the board, and then you're actually ready to run and go. A variety of different companies actually nowadays have entrepreneurship programs already within the company, because they all realize that actually entrepreneurship leads to a more entrepreneurial thinking, and therefore to innovation. So what you could do is actually take your specific social or environmental problem you want to work on and actually suggest it to that entrepreneur program, so you can actually run through the existing processes. Or the other option is, if there are other innovation processes that you have in the company, sort of apply to them. Sort of wherever you can build on existing structures and use those, it's much easier than completely starting from scratch, because the corporation loves its processes, and wherever you can build on those, it's going to make it easier for you to succeed. So these are just a couple of points of guidance. I think also, once you have then created a pilot and you're actually running, you will need to continue communicating like crazy. Communicate to all the relevant stakeholders within the company. Communicate to people outside of the company. Tell them what journey you're on. Because as more, of course, this topic is spread and you have allies within the company, the more difficult it will be to actually kill it eventually. And in the end, the way we look at it from Yunus Social Business, our theory of change is that in some ways you need to create an example of a perfect social business. And that will actually allow the company to understand what actually it would mean to be a better business. And we hope that that actually will create a mindset shift in not just the one employee, but actually a much broader set of employees and also the leadership in the company, to really drive the entire company to a change. And that will then, of course, also include much more fundamental changes, like how is actually the management being compensated? Are they just, getting bonuses because they reach some financial targets, or are they also getting bonuses because they reach social and environmental targets? What is the culture in the company? So many of these things will also shift after you've seen a concrete example. So we talk always about action learning. You need to try something, you need to do something. Once you've done that, your mindset changes, the way you think about things changes. And I fundamentally believe in that.
Cool. Thanks, Saskia. And these were all great, wise words for everybody who wants to make a difference, also working inside a large corporation, which definitely can be done.
You can do it. You can do it. That's what I want to say. You can do it. Apply for our program.
Great. We have another question coming in, and this is for Vaibhav, because you certainly don't need to convince your boss, the CEO of S4S, about this. Vaibhav, from your point of view, what has been the biggest challenge during your journey of creating S4S and getting to where you are today?
In finding a first paying customer is the biggest challenge for a business. We did it twice. Initially, we started our business as selling of machines, the solar dryers, to farmers. And finding out the first farmer who says that we believe on you, I want to buy your machine, and that machine makes a change in my life and to my financials was first. And then a couple of years, we transformed our business from someone who is making machines to someone who is selling dehydrated food from our machines and from our farms. And that was the second change and the second biggest challenge. Again, finding a large corporate or a smaller food company that says that your products are equal to something that we are buying today, or those are making a change to our life. And again, paying for that. So I think that's the biggest challenge in the business. And we faced this 2 times when we had a beautiful business. So, yes.
Thanks, Vaibhav. Very, very inspiring, I think. And I think if there's enough belief and conviction, big things can happen. So I think that was all the time we have reserved for today. Thank you so much, Saskia. Thank you so much, Vaibhav, for taking the time to talk with us. Keep doing the wonderful work that you do. We'll follow you both on social media and see how your work develops. Stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for joining. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks for joining Home Office Talks, and thanks for the questions. Tune in again next Monday, where we continue on the topic of social entrepreneurship and probably also intrapreneurship. We will meet next Monday leaders of Enactus, which is a network of 72,000 students and social innovators. So until then, next Monday, stay safe and stay healthy. Bye-bye.